update on the siding project. Probably about, I don't even know, 10 hours into it at this point. Mostly been working on the trim, the corner pieces, the garage door trim, and there's a lot to that. I think once I get all that done, the actual siding itself will start getting up pretty quick. But one thing I did over Christmas weekend is work on painting all this, I guess I call it brick mold around here. Wanted to kind of match what's on the house. And that kind of varies along the way, but some of the windows are a little different than the doors, but it's kind of a darker gray, a little bit darker than what the siding's going to be. So I had to paint all that, and you got to paint it when it's fairly warm. It was cold over Christmas, so I painted all in the basement. Just took me about 6 times of painting one side of each, painting the second time, rolling at 90 degrees, painting it again, and just kind of kept working it like that, letting it dry for 4 or 5 hours. So that took some time in itself. Then cutting and trimming and nailing all that on there. And all these corner pieces have to be custom fit at the top. You got to cut them out with a pair of shears, get all that worked out. And one thing that's slowing me down compared to a normal situation is the way this wall sticks out. I might have explained this in another video, but what I had planned on doing was running my siding lower, pretty low, so you wouldn't see much of this block, center block. So I told the builder to leave it 3/4 of an inch out, so I'd have room to nail furring strips to the center block and then continue down my siding to the, roughly like maybe there or so. Well, a couple things happened. One, I got to reading and thinking is you don't want to put this too close to the ground because it'll get splash up on the bottom like on this, whereas this is treated, but still you really don't want that. So you want to have a little bit of distance up, and then you also got to measure to the top of the wall to see how everything's going to line up. You don't want to you're trying to avoid having a transition on the siding in the middle one. You want it to have a nice little lip that rolls up into the very top. So there's all kinds of considerations to think about when you're setting that, the starter strip, I guess is what you'd say, trying to get that height right. And at one point I was going to try to set it like right here, which wasn't going to buy me much, but a little bit. And I tried driving a cinder block nail, concrete nail, whatever they're called, masonry nail, I guess is what it's actually called, into this. And what I found was it was too close to the edge, and it was like chipping a V out in the block. And if I was another inch or two lower, I probably could have made it work. But not to mention they're real hard to drive in there, and you're splitting the boards in half, and they're kind of thick, like triangle shape. And it was just going to be a huge hassle doing that all the way around. And so I thought, you know what, let's just make it the same height, a little bit lower than this seal plate above the center block. Well, what that basically means is that I hardly picked up anything in terms of trying to set this lower and not see as much block. So if that was the case, if I did it again, I'd have the builder just run the OSB flush with the seal plate. Like I said, it's about 3/4 of an inch sticking out. It's kind of hard to see. But so now I've got to go around and put these on here, which that wouldn't be too big a deal, but it varies. Whenever they're building the building like this, I tell them to put 3/4 of an inch out. That's plus or minus an eighth, plus or minus a quarter around the whole building, which that's not much when you're talking about a 30 by 44 building. But when you're talking about trying to get the starter strip to look right, it is a good bit. So what I've found is that sometimes it's 3/4 and I can just set it flat like this. Sometimes it's closer to an inch, and I've got to rip these furring strips and make them an inch wide and then nail them that way, like sideways onto there, to get that right. I've tried doing it with like just having a 1/4 inch gap right there, and what I found is that it just, you notice it, like the siding is rolled back into here a little bit. And I tried to bend that aluminum starter strip out. You do that, and then it pulls the whole siding down a little bit. Maybe one side needs pulled out, one doesn't, and it makes the whole thing unlevel a little bit. It just kind of messes everything up a little bit, and I just really rather not look at that for 30 years. So I'm taking the hard path here of custom ripping each one to fit exactly that offset. And again, that's taking some time, but the good news is once I get going, I think the fronts here where I really want to get it nice looking, the sides I could probably wing it a little bit more. You may not notice it near as much. Where it comes into these corners, I think is where you notice it, the offset the most, if you don't have that exactly right. So like I said, I don't know if you can see it, you can kind of see that offset there. I haven't measured there. It's probably, I found a lot of it's closer to an inch instead of 3/4. So I mean, technically the builder messed up a little bit in some places, I guess you could say, but again, they're trying to build walls and setting them up on there and everything. Probably hard to get it exactly 3/4 everywhere, but I've got this side started pretty good. Got my corner pieces done, all around the garage door done. See, once it gets warm enough out, which is kind of warm right now, but maybe this summer, I'm gonna paint all this to match this piece here. I'll probably mask off that piece of weather strip and paint all that. One problem I'm having is that I did some reading, and you're really not supposed to paint PVC that dark of a color. What they say is that sun hits it, it expands a lot, and it can either warp it or cause like cracks in the paint, so you see like white spider webs in the paint, all kinds of different things that can happen. The problem is I don't have much choice that I've found. It just kind of is what it is. You know, my options are I could have just done wood around there, which doesn't have an expansion problem, but then you got the issue of it just rotting over time, getting wood behind it or water behind it. So didn't want to do that. I didn't want to paint it a different color. This side wouldn't be too big a deal. Over there, it's gonna be kind of awkward to have a different color trim than what the house has. I could repaint all the trim around the entire house, and that would be a huge pain. But you know, again, I'm gonna be doing the siding on this probably next fall, and while I had all that off there, I guess I could paint, and I don't know what color would look right anyway. You know, maybe like a lighter gray, something like that. So I didn't have a ton of choices, so I just went ahead and painted it. And like I said, I'm gonna paint all this. I'll probably paint, who knows, I may stop at this, because see, the door is gonna be like this sandstone color. I may stop here. I may go ahead and paint all this color here. Right now we got a bunch of different colors going on, really 4 different colors temporarily. But anyway, I'm just kind of chancing it and see what happens with this PVC being painted that dark. One thing I did is I left my gaps pretty good on the corners up there, which you're supposed to leave some gap anyway. I got one there, over there, a little more than I would like, but I'm gonna paint that up inside there so you shouldn't notice it as much, but because I'm thinking this is gonna expand more than like white PVC does, which even the white expands some. So anyway, I think they say like a 1/4 inch every 8 feet or so, you know, between the coldest and the hottest it gets outside. But I'm hoping that since I got a lot of tree cover around here in the summer and leaves on, that you don't, the sun won't hit it too much, you know, versus the house is just sitting out in the open. So the trees may be what saves me on that. Otherwise, something's gonna happen there. One thing I looked into is you can get like a aluminum cover that's kind of the same shape as the brick mold and put over it, which I kind of hate to do that, but it may come to that. One thing I'm working on doing too is putting all this flashing tape. It goes up in 90s around, glues onto that, and that trying to keep all the water out from behind there and getting behind this door. So this door is like a wood piece here, which is another thing. I'm hoping if I keep it painted, it doesn't rot, but I may end up having to put a storm door on this to keep the water off it. But so anyway, there's just a lot of little things to it. And of course, all the J channel cutting out, the starter strips, like I mentioned, the custom make on the boards on the bottom, painting all this PVC, cutting it all out. And even the boards around the garage door here took some time, especially that top board. That's a 12-footer. It was kind of hard to hang and get it exactly right. Nice and flush all the way around there. Ended up having to use some deck screws to temporarily hold up in there instead of finishing nails, because it was just too much of a board to try to get up there by myself. But anyway, I'm definitely learned a few lessons. The one thing I did on the other side, I'm gonna have to go back and fix, is on this J channel here, I'd try to 45 it right here, and that way it would kind of match this. And what I got to thinking later is that leaves an area for when water's in here, it runs like a little gutter. When it runs here, it can fall back in there, go back in this direction. So I kind of redesigning it. It doesn't look quite as good, but I'm basically running this all the way out to the end. That way it can flow into this one, keep that water out of there. So like I said, I'm going to go back and redo the other side, because I already made it a 45 connection there. But a lot of little things like that I'm kind of learning and thinking about. And you know, how you cut those top pieces out. I kind of messed up the first one and then learned on that one, and the other ones went pretty smooth. But a lot of up and down ladders and striking chalk lines, and so anyway, like I said, it looks like I haven't got much done for about, like I said, I'm gonna guess maybe 10 hours into it. But today I should finish up all the trim out here. Tomorrow I got a whole day of nice weather. I'm hoping to get a good chunk of this siding on this front side. So maybe I'll do another update once I got something more to show, because like I said, it doesn't look like very impressive at this point.